I like to keep these, get these started as soon as possible so that we can be cognizant of the city staff and all of our schedules. So we'll go ahead and call tonight's meeting to order. It's 5:05. Roll call, please.
Commissioners Fahey.
Here.
Hearns.
Present.
Latanzi.
Here.
Wiley. Vice Chair Fluke.
Here.
Chairman Derryberry.
That's me.
We have a quorum.
Okay, if everyone can go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. If we can repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to this flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we have one speaker card tonight. Mr. Paul, did you want to talk about one of the agenda items? You did, so I'll save you till later. So we have our consent calendar items. That's our meeting minutes from August. You guys have all hopefully had an opportunity to give those a quick review. And if they look satisfactory, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve them. Oh yeah, never mind. Let's go. Yeah, looks like motion carries 5-0.
Elizabeth.
Oh, and we do have Mrs. Zimmerman here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move into our presentations. Tonight we have presentations from the Antelope Valley College, Tarzana Treatment Center, and then we're going to go ahead and finish tonight off with a discussion amongst our commission as to how and we should proceed. So I think we have Jill Zimmerman here from AV College. Come on down.
I'm so sorry I'm late.
We're so happy you're here.
Well, thank you. I'm Dr. Jill Zimmerman from Antelope Valley College, and it is my pleasure to be here. When I got called about this wonderful commission that you're doing, I was like, okay, what can we do and what does Antelope Valley College has to offer our students in our community? I'm a colleague of Mr. Wiley, and so he's the one that called me. I'm certainly very familiar with Michelle, serve on her board of directors, and so I think that we are in a great position to work on the needs that are not as natural that they can come. The reason why I was late is I had a homeless brother and sister living in their car with very little resources, and we're more ashamed than anything. They are in our TAY population, and so working on how to take away that. What other issues do they have? What other health concerns do they have? What else can we help to do as a community by using our community partners? So I'm not really sure when I was asked about what all we offer. I can tell you what we have at the college. What we use is our wraparound services, and most of that is partnering with our community agencies that you probably know about. We believe, at least I believe, and I have convinced my whole college, and I'm delighted from the president on down, that we're going to try to create as barrier-free an educational opportunity, because that's what's going to change the trajectory of their lives and their families' lives. So that could mean, what is the barrier for you getting into school? It could be financial aid. How do we help with that? It could be bus pass. How do we work with AVTA to get bus pass programs? Is it food? We have a huge pantry. We actually had a meeting last week to potentially expand that problem or that resource. If it's textbooks, we have a program for a textbooks rental program. If it's showering, they can shower on campus by a new law that just passed last year. If it's school supplies, we have that. If it's health care, we have health. We have a physical health that we've contracted with Bakersfield, CSUB Bakersfield on our campus, and mental health. We also have a dentist that they can have dental cleanings and care. We do a lot of health education. We're very successful. We just started being a totally smoke-free campus with a grant that was written, so we're very excited about that. We're doing a whole new incentive program and working with our suicide prevention. We wrote a grant. We have an online suicide prevention program. I'm actually going to be going tomorrow to a training, well, it's actually a webinar training on suicide prevention called Sidewalk Talks, which I might kind of ease into that a little bit of how to get to do that in the city. It's happening all over in some of the major cities where people just talk. And they actually, we hire listeners, or we volunteer listeners to talk with folks to help reduce loneliness, isolation, anxiety, and obviously suicide. We lost a couple of students last year to suicide. We had one suicide attempt so far this year. So I'm very concerned about what's going on with our hospital and how do we get some more space, particularly our adolescents. It just happened to have been an adolescent, so they had to go down below because there's no beds up here. So how do we help kind of combat that at the front end if we can? And then working with our partners. We really have a very clear mission at what we do at Antelope Valley College, and that is to offer and have students earn degrees to become taxpayers. But these are their barriers they're facing every day, and they can't succeed if these are their main hurdles. So we're trying to figure out what we can do to help do that, and by using our resources and leveraging those with others is what our goal is, and what I continue to do and strive for. So I'm not quite sure. One of the areas that I know we don't have a good program we do for our athletes particularly, they're required to have a drug testing screening, but if anyone comes up with a screen, a tox screen, there's not, other than Tarzana, there's no really other place up here for drug and alcohol. We certainly have a lot of issues with drugs on campus in the sense of marijuana use. What are we doing with that? We're definitely, it doesn't matter that it's legal. It can't be on a federal campus. So our discipline process deals with that. Can't have marijuana on campus. We have yet to see, and it's because it hasn't become obvious, I don't think they stay very long with the opioid epidemic. They really are not able to really function in our community much, very long, and stay in school and do all that. We have a very active BIT team, which stands for Behavioral Intervention, the CARE program. So if a faculty member sees a student or a staff member sees a student that's just a little not within the norm, they contact me. I call them. Sometimes it could be a student sleeping in the class. Sometimes it could be a student who's acting out. Could be a student who's just concerned. And then we go and do a very active intervention to find out what we can. But the resources are what we have in the community. And I know you've heard some of those, and they're just limited. And so we need to keep trying for how do we expand those services up here. Yeah. Hi.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zimmerman, for this very enlightening presentation, because I had no idea that you all have all of these beautiful things available. Now, these services are strictly for enrolled students?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to say yes, and then I'm going to say maybe. So we do a lot with our outreach. So a lot of times we're in the community, and they'll see a brochure that we have for our homeless program is called Arches, Reaching Their Dreams. Our foster youth is called Guardian Scholars. Our first-year experience student has a huge parent program. So a lot of times we'll hear parents. SOAR High School, I'm a founder of SOAR High School. We'll hear of a family, we'll hook with the resources in the high school, and then see what resources, because they're also college students, we have for them. We were able to use some resources, of a family of 5. The oldest was at SOAR High School, who needed a $1,000 down payment to get into an apartment. And they couldn't get $1,000 down payment, and so the college absorbed that through our foster youth found that we have. We always try to find find new avenues to connect to the family. We just wrote a grant, was received. The money's starting to come in October. I'm going to knock on wood without making noise. That the money comes in to start a Dreamer Center for undocumented, and the goal of the Dreamer Center is to do families. So we'll be providing a whole lot of support to that family, to the families of our undocumented.
So basically, there has to be at least
connection.
One person
Yeah.
that is connected with
Right. There has to be a connection. So, like, for instance, students in the pantry, they can take home groceries to feed their family, but there has to be a student who's
Got it.
receiving those funds. Yeah. We connect to our other partners that they can get services for. We advertise all the time on all of our links of what places for students who are not currently enrolled.
Okay.
So what Dr. Zimmerman and I discussed was that she feels possibly that their drug prevention program is not really a strong program, if existent, and thought that our commission could partner with her to have a program that could be an outreach to college students for drug prevention, and then grow from there, and then bring in some of the other partners that we've had communication with, and come up with some other programs that all work together in unison. And so I'm really happy to have you here,
Yeah, that would be
and
awesome.
I think it would be a really good partnership.
Yeah, we're always looking for ways to support our students, and we've just not been able to get a good handle on that, so it'd be great.
Well, I think from what I heard was all the things that the commission heard as well was everything that you're doing, and I kept waiting for you to get to what is the drug prevention program. Commissioner Hearns, asked a wonderful question, and I was still waiting, and I think Ms. Brubaker cleared that up, because if you are missing there is a gap there, I think what our commission is hopeful to do is to fill that in one way or the other. I'm so thankful that the community has Tarzana, because if it wasn't for Tarzana, it doesn't seem like we have much of any other option. And they're here tonight. They've been here every meeting, whether they were invited or not. They're so glad to fill their smiling faces in our room. So, but without them, like you said, it's
Nothing. And Tarzana, we do tabling events and communication and awareness, but that's not enough. We need to have
A program.
We need to have a program, we need to have a plan, we need to be able to have a space for students or community members to get the help they need and then reintegrate. None of that exists other than what we have with Tarzana, and so that's a huge gap. And I don't, we always like to talk about what we do have, but this is the missing. That and housing is our missing link. A lot of places won't even let someone stay if they have used. I mean, there's Michelle, you and I have talked about this forever, so we know that there's just a really tough void there. So absolutely, anything we can. I know Mr. Wiley said, I'm going to keep you. I'm like, all right, let me know what we can do, because it's a huge problem.
I think
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I think just kind of a thought that came off the top of my head just now is that component of outreach, because even though they may not be college age folks who might not be in school at the moment, but through outreach, that can be kind of a killing two birds with one stone, is to get them enrolled, but also to get those services that they need, because if they're substance using or abusing, but if they have a positive alternative, such as going to school, then we can kind of
And when we're talking about
link that.
access and success, we're really talking about we can provide them an opportunity with that. We can provide them with financial aid if they are eligible, and all of those kinds of things. But then there needs to be all those wraparounds.
Right.
It needs to be, how do we really help that student stay on that path, stay sober, and if there's an issue, how do we quickly resolve it before they wind up having to go back into that spiral? There isn't as much of that how do we catch them early? I don't like telling a story about a student, but she was wonderful. She had been in jail. She had been recovering. She actually was a sociology major. She did great. Was working in a rehab center and helping. Went to UCLA, got a little overwhelmed, started using again. Just got out of rehab. She is doing great. She's back to finish. She's got a semester and a half to finish, because she was able to take a medical leave from UCLA, so she's been able to pick those classes up, and within a semester she expects to have her master's in social work. But it was that, how do you get picked up quickly instead of really spiral where she's lost everything? And we don't have that in that community. We really need to get that in this community to get them early and then to maintain their assistance.
Well, I was going to say, we've had a lot of presentations, and it's all kind of come around to the 18 and above that are, the high schools aren't really seeing that. It's really that age group, and it's interesting because I wonder how many, if they had some information or an outlet, wouldn't drop out. You said it right at the beginning that those, you don't really have the problem because they can't sustain what they're doing. So I think it's a really good partnership that we could create.
Absolutely. And, it just breaks my heart when someone comes into my office and I know they're struggling and there's nothing that we can do. We are talking, I will tell you, I have to be honest, I don't know the current status, so I'm going to be a little vague. We were working on creating a certificate for drug and alcohol, and I think it was being submitted to the state, and I don't know at this moment for drug and alcohol treatment under Irene Gatt, one of our new deans, to get that as a training program back on our campus because there's such a need for drug and alcohol counselors. And so, it's just providing the providers and providing the program. So I'm hoping that if our program gets in there, we can be part of that mix from a different perspective. So.
Well, something that triggered in my brain was Commissioner Hearns asked you a question about, do you have to be a student? And you said, well, yes, but no. Because the thing that I think I hear is it may not be an 18, 19-year-old student who might be having the problem. It might be a friend, it might be a brother, it might be a sister, it might be a parent. But if they know that the education is there and the resources are available, and if the college is the avenue for which they find those resources, whether it is the student, then that's. I mean, it's just trying to reach that demographic, the ones that need the help, right?
Right.
And if it's not just your student, you touch so many lives, but those lives then touch so many more. And so I think that maybe we've found where
Yeah.
we
And
need
you
to
have
go.
the venue, like we have the
Correct.
homeless meetings there, so you
Yes.
have the
We
facility
do.
that all of the people can get to if they don't belong to the college. So if you have a meeting and they have the program, then you are getting the other people invited in to hear about it.
Absolutely. And when we do our outreach, when we talk about things that we're doing, we're out in the community. If they know that there's a place where they can come to get support, but it can't be a one-shot deal. That's the problem. A lot of times it's
Right.
one shot and then they're done, and then you go, now what? And that's been a problem for me, is how do we do sustainability? How do we really help create something that is meaningful and is going to be here today as well as tomorrow? And so, that would be maybe, as that program gets developed, and how do we become a partner in that? How do we do this long-term so that we can really serve our community collaboratively?
Absolutely. Commissioners, any questions for Dr. Zimmerman?
Do you have a card?
I do. I'll be happy to give them and share with you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Okay, thanks. Let me get your card. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was wonderful.
We'll see you
And I'll
next
give you
month.
a call.
I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. Perfect. That was wonderful. Now something I think that will kind of tickle our senses a little more of Tarzana Treatment Centers here. And the glare is so bad I can't see actually who it is, so I apologize for not calling you out by name. Are the lights that bright to you guys too? They're like so bright to me. Just Tuesday? Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I need like a makeup person. I'm probably really shiny. Anyways, yeah.
Well, thank you for inviting us. As you kind of mentioned before, we're from Tarzana Treatment Centers. My name is Sarah May, and I'm a health educator. And I'm here with my colleague Desiree and our program coordinator, Ruth. We just wanted to give you guys kind of a brief overview of the findings from a methamphetamines needs assessment that we conducted in the Antelope Valley very recently. So we actually just finished it about a month ago. So all the data that we're sharing is very up to date. And I think you guys have a PowerPoint, and then you also have a handout with some graphs on it, just for you to follow along and as a point of reference as we go through. Okay, so we decided that we wanted to conduct a needs assessment because based on data from Tarzana Treatment Centers, we noticed that there was a strong increase in methamphetamine use between 2013 and 2017 out here in the Antelope Valley. We had 271 adult outpatients in 2017 compared to 133 in 2013. And then 120 adult residential patients in 2017 compared to 58 in 2013. And we also saw a bit of an increase among our youth, But as we're going to talk about a little bit later, as you guys had mentioned before, we're not really seeing this drug as much in our youth population. We also talked to different patients that we had at our treatment center where they told us that methamphetamine was widely used out here in the Antelope Valley and because it's cheap and highly available. And then we also found that although the Antelope Valley only makes up about 3% of the entire population of Los Angeles County, within the treatment center here in the Antelope Valley, we had 11% of the county's methamphetamines admissions. So this is a big issue, obviously, out here. We're also funded under a substance prevention control grant through LA County. So we're mandated to reduce the availability and access to methamphetamines, specifically among youth out here in our community. And then I'm sure some people know, we really lack local data specifically for drug and alcohol prevalence. A lot of times we're lumped into other SPAs, and we really wanted to have SPA-specific data so we could understand how to mitigate the problem. So just really quick, we developed a timeline to kind of understand what we were going to do when throughout this whole process. We've been working on it for a little over a year now. Next, we began to develop a literature review to understand the problem on a bigger level. So we wanted to understand it nationally, then within California, and then county specific, and then the Antelope Valley. Next, we developed data collection tools. And so we developed surveys, community public opinion surveys, focus group scripts, and key informant interview scripts. And we developed these both in Spanish and English so we could understand the problem within the whole entire community, because that's obviously very important. Then our evaluator was able to collate, clean, and analyze the data. And then she wrote up our final report and made recommendations. And now we're presenting our findings to different groups out in the community. So I'm just going to briefly go over some of the findings, and then we're going to dig a little bit deeper into them. But you guys also have that information in front of you, so with a little bit more detail. So we noticed that people who were using methamphetamine were not productive members of society. There was a lot of family relationship breakdowns. The crime rate within people who were using methamphetamines is increasing. And we also found a connection to the sex trade in methamphetamine. And then within our community out here, we noticed a lack of understanding and openness between generations and the community regarding drug addiction as a whole. And then we looked at some of the impacts on health, both physical and mental health for users, and we noticed a rapid decline when they began to use meth, and it continued throughout the progression. We also talked to law enforcement, and we found that there was a huge impact on law enforcement resources. There's been an increase in drug-related crimes, and then also the cost of paperwork and the man hours that it takes to cite someone for methamphetamine use is really costs our law enforcement a lot, and they have a lack of manpower out here as well, so they're really being affected. We talked to the hospital and noticed a cost to the healthcare system. Resources were being used. People who were using methamphetamine were going to the hospital, and they were taking those resources from other people who are sick. AMR resources. We talked to a driver, an EMT, and he was telling us how they would respond to many calls of methamphetamine users, and that took up a huge portion of their calls, and so that then other members of the community weren't able to access that. Then also public health resources as well. And then we wanted to look at some existing resources that we did have out here to help mitigate the problem. So we had different local organizations, treatment centers, and then local youth activities as well. But we also noticed that there were some gaps in resources. So although we do have youth activities, a lot of them are inaccessible to our youth. There's a high cost. There's a lack of transportation. Kids aren't able to get there. We don't have sufficient prevention programs as well, lack of funding, lack of resources. And then we also heard that there was a lack of parental involvement within our youth. And then, as we talked about a little bit earlier, law enforcement, there's just not enough resources for them as well. So they're struggling a bit with this too. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of that. And I wanted to talk about youth use because that's what we focus on, is youth prevention specifically. And generally what we found was that youth aren't really using methamphetamines, and they're kind of staying away from some of the harder drugs. But the ones that are using it are usually introduced to it by an older partner or a family member. So an older boyfriend, mom or dad is using it, and that becomes normalized in their culture. And then all dabblers, youth who are kind of dabbling in it, become at much higher risk of developing the addiction later on down the road. And we also see that with drugs like marijuana. So if a child is using marijuana, we do notice that the likelihood of them using a harder drug such as methamphetamine as they grow up, it's going to increase. And then some Tarzana Treatment Center specific data. We found that between 2014 to 2017, the intake for meth among youth, 55% of our intakes for youth for methamphetamines were female. So we're seeing it a little bit more among girls. 45% were 17 years old at intake, 27% were 16 years old, 18.5% were 15 years old, and then as a whole, 90% of the intakes for methamphetamines were between 15 and 17. So we, based on public opinion surveys, focus groups, key informant interviews, and our data collection, we found that youth who are using methamphetamines are using it for a lot of like the normal reasons that you would think: peer pressure, boredom. As I said before, having older partners or family members who were introduced it to them and provided them access to it. It kind of became normalized in their life. Some of them were graduating to methamphetamines, as I said, from using softer drugs, so drugs such as marijuana, alcohol, things like that. And then we also noticed that some of our youth and TAY population who are living on the streets were using methamphetamine as a way to stay awake for their safety at night. So methamphetamine makes it, you have more energy. So they were looking out for themselves because it's dangerous living on the streets. Or they were also selling drugs in order to provide for themselves as well. And then you guys have a quote on the next slide. I won't read it because it's kind of long. But this was from one of our key informant interviews. And this person was talking about how, although they see marijuana is kind of seen as the gateway drug. And so our youth who are using marijuana, eventually they're going to be at higher risk later on down the road of using methamphetamine.
Hi everyone, Desiree Tanatango, health educator. So I'm going to go into adult use, which is on the 8th slide. So generally it was agreed that users who use methamphetamine were actually between their mid-20s and mid-30s. As Sarah said, we didn't really see it so much in youth as more in adults. And then for Tarzana Treatment Center's data from 2014 to 2017, the intake for meth was 47% were between the ages of 25 and 34 years old. 26% were between the ages of 35 and 44 years old. 57% were female, so just like the youth, females were more likely to use meth in regards to the adults. And then 62% had a high school education as their highest education level achieved. But when it came to the local emergency service providers, they actually found that 18 to 25-year-olds were the highest number of meth users that they had seen. And then this is just some more Tarzana Treatment Center's data that's on page 9 or slide 9 that we have here. Sarah kind of summed up a little bit of the data, but just to kind of break it down a little bit more, 271 adults that were in outpatients reported methamphetamine as their primary substance choice in 2017, compared to 133 in 2013. So there was a big increase there. And then there was 120 adults in in residential reported methamphetamine use as their primary use of substance in 2017, compared to 58 in 2013. And then, as Sarah said, the youth, didn't really increase. It actually pretty much stayed the same. And then we have a quote on slide 10. just from one of our patients that we had in a focus group. So basically he was saying that the majority of the people that were in our focus group had started when they were teenagers, but that there were a few of them there that had started in their late 20s or early 30s. So young adults, older adults kind of. And so he was just basically saying that you can tell that methamphetamine actually affects all ages. It's not just with youth or with adults or seniors, it affects everyone. So it shows how important it is to have prevention services for youth at early ages in order to stop methamphetamine use before it starts or before it turns into addiction. And then some of the reasons that our key informants, our surveys, our focus group came up with that said the reasons why they had started using methamphetamine, they said it was cheaper than other drugs. So some of them might have started with drugs that were a little more expensive, such as prescription drugs, and then they realized as their addiction was progressing that maybe they couldn't afford it anymore, so they went to, instead, meth, which is a lot cheaper. And then another one that Sarah kind of talked about, the effects last longer than other drugs. You know, you could have a lot of energy for several days, is what we had heard. And so because of that, on the next bullet, they're talking about they used it because, you know, a lot of them work long hours. They might commute to work, so you have to stay up longer, and that just takes a lot of energy out of you. So that was one of the reasons. And then when it came to the approximate number of users and deaths per year, so DMH and AMR actually found that the number of people that were using methamphetamine in the Antelope Valley was actually significantly high. They estimated between 10 and 20% of the population have used methamphetamine. And then about 65% of patients with substance use disorder claim methamphetamine as their primary abused substance. But often people who use methamphetamine tend to use other drugs currently, such as alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs, and not just opioids, there's also benzodiazepines. And then we found that deaths have actually increased because of methamphetamine, because of their physical effects. So some of the physical effects were kidney damage, heart damage, brain damage, but also because of mental health effects, such as paranoia, recklessness, violent actions, and hallucinations that led to accidents. And then, as Sarah spoke before, we talked to some of the first responders at AMR. So he actually said that 1 out of every 10 people either have used methamphetamine, or either are currently using or have used methamphetamine in the last 1 to 2 years. So it's caused a giant increase within their emergency calls, whether that's overdoses or calls to fatalities. And he did say there was an increase with just meth use when it comes to fatalities on its own. And he also found that methamphetamine is used throughout the Antelope Valley in all ages, both high and low socioeconomic areas, but they tend to be more in rural areas. And then the next one on 14 is actually just a quote by him. I'll actually read it because it's a pretty good one. So it says, the paramedic recalled one call he had responded to in a higher income area of the Antelope Valley where a young man had eaten 2 grams of crystal meth. And he did say the young man was like in his 20s, early 20s. When he arrived, the man was agitated and trying to fight everyone. His heart was beating uncontrollably fast. He passed out in front of the paramedics, and his heart stopped. Unfortunately, they were unable to revive him. So even being in a higher income area and with such a young man, it still damaged his heart enough to where it stopped, and they were unable to revive him. And then we have another quote from AV Hospital. It's from one of the doctors there. He basically said that in the last 5 to 10 years, methamphetamine has definitely increased. He said they might have 6 to 10 patients in the emergency department testing positive for methamphetamine, and that they often see them coming to the emergency room because they're brought in by the sheriff's department. Maybe they're acting psychotic. And he did say the majority of patients that they see is like 20 to 30, and a large majority of them do have meth problems, and that it is also the most common serious drug they see in the urine tox screens.
So the next couple of slides just kind of go deeply into what Sarah and Desiree mentioned, so I'm not going to go too much into them, like the impact on the community, how they perceive meth users as not somebody that really contributes to the community, to see them as someone that isn't very successful. Also, like Sarah mentioned, the law enforcement capacity, how they're restrained to certain things that they do, especially with the prop that passed with the misdemeanor and the felony. No,
Yeah.
the felony. How it becomes a misdemeanor rather than being able to incarcerate them. So with all this information that we've shared and all the data that we collected, what the 5 recommendations that we came up with. The first is to develop a better youth community education. So really educate adults and youth about the effects methamphetamine can possibly have. If it's having parent groups where we just have a discussion where they can share their opinions and have an open dialogue, and also with youth, just really give them the information. The second would be develop a dynamic local mixed media public health campaign. Again, just in a larger scale, instead of just educating in a classroom or in a workshop, really doing a public health campaign so that we can do billboards, we can do really media and really reach a broader audience than just in those groups that we're planning to hold. The third one would be promote activity for prevention and destigmatization to limit availability. I think everybody's kind of, oh no, this doesn't happen here, or this is not a problem here, but it is. It's a problem that we have in our community. So really addressing it openly and having those dialogues and conversations. The fourth one is promote events and activities, lifestyles that strengthen the family. Within our findings, within our interviews, family is a really key important aspect when it comes to drug use or early drug use amongst youth. So having those resources so that families can come together and really have that strength base. And number 5 is promote a safe, support safe and family and fun extracurricular activities for youth. Like we mentioned, there are activities for youth, but a lot of them require money or transportation, and a lot of our youth don't have access to that. Especially being in a rural area, we hear a lot from our youth that there's nothing to do out here. So kind of really seeing what we could do based on those recommendations. And how do we plan to implement the plan? We actually, with each recommendation that we have strategies that target each recommendation. We have specifically what are the tasks within those strategies? What are the responsible parties? Some of them, or most of them, are us and our coalition that we host, but we're always looking into partnering with other entities, organizations. Also utilize the resources that we have and kind of keep in mind the resources that we don't have. And creating a time frame as well as, for example, for the first one, if we wanted to do the education groups, what would that look like? Would it be a span of a year? Or would it go further? That type of thing. And then also having the expected outcomes for each recommendation that we have. Is there any questions? I know it's kind of like a lot of information to take in at once.
Go ahead.
Thanks again. Again, very helpful, very, very helpful. I think this is definitely going to take some time to sort through and to figure out, what part we can play in this. I know as it relates to youth activities, I believe truly the city of Lancaster can play an integral part in that, as well as partnering up with local churches, places of worship, schools, and everybody having a part to play in that, because that is definitely doable.
Yeah, I think what we've been really thinking about is giving youth the ownership of being able to create. We've brainstormed with ourselves, having youth kind of create their own event and see what they want to do with having, kind of us as supporting or anybody else who wants to be a part of it, just kind of see what youth is really into and how they can make it enjoyable for them instead of us telling them what the event's going to be about, So those are some of the ideas that we've thought about as well. But that's a great suggestion.
I do have a question, because one of the biggest gaps that I've seen and continue to see is what is being done to interfere in the generational ties to addiction. If you're seeing drug use in kids, there's often pretty significant addiction issues in the family. So one of the big gaps that I've seen for years is how do you interrupt that with young people, that generational tie that's so prevalent in determining whether somebody becomes an actual addict or not.
So I know for us, the way that we kind of handle that, we try and increase a lot of our youth's protective factors. So as I said, we're in the Boys and Girls Club. We're trying to get into the schools as much as we can, but we understand that a lot of the youth that we work with do have lots of risk factors, and those are things that we run into when we're teaching classes and we hear about drug use in the family or gang experience, things like that. And so what we try and do, as Ruth was saying, is we try and build up their protective factors as much as we can. So we teach them things about how to apply for college, or giving them different outlets, giving them things that they like to do to kind of, where they can engage in that and it can be a positive experience and a positive activity for them. I know that that's what we're doing on our end. I don't know, do you have any information
Not necessarily, but just kind of piggyback what Sarah said. It's the approach that we're going forward is don't tell them no, but give them an alternative of what they could do. Mm-hmm. So kind of like building those protective factors of what their life can look like aside from doing drugs and alcohol.
Thank you. And we also try to give them like the real facts. We're not, like Ruth said, we're not telling them no. We're going to say, okay, if you do this, which we don't really want you to, this is what's going to happen, or this is what could happen.
So, the needs assessment, how many people is the sample size, and where did you?
So so that information, those are actually from our public opinion surveys, methamphetamine surveys, and they were out in the community. So anytime that we did a community event, we would ask if anybody wanted to fill it out. And I think for that one, it was a short number. I believe it was like 200 or so.
And it's just adults, so it's all 18 and over for that specific survey. But we did interview youth within focus groups. We had youth-centered focus groups. We interviewed the Tate population, so we went to Penny Lane and conducted a focus group there. And then we also conducted focus groups and key informant interviews with as many community members as we can. So we looked at all of our stakeholders and tried to reach the audience in a broad spectrum, hit as many people as possible.
And at Tarzana, do you have any programs for the parents that do have youth that are substance abuse users?
I believe we do have like a family therapy, but not necessarily for just using in particular.
Well, I think whatever we decide to do, it's clear that we can't do it without Tarzana's involvement. For one, I don't want to replicate or duplicate anything that you already have in process, because if we're going to do that, we just need to utilize your resources and services. None of us up here, I think, I'll speak for myself. I'm not qualified to do anything that you guys are doing, so I'm not going to pretend to do that. So anyways, I thank you so much. Your work in the community is wonderful. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate having us. And again, Tarzana is not just the treatment side. There is a small prevention side. So we're really trying to push forward the prevention side before they get into treatment. So.
Well, you all might want to talk with Dr. Zimmerman because, I mean, just in hearing you say, listen, have you tried to apply for college? Well, boom. Mm-hmm. There's your connection. Yeah. So.
The Boys and Girls Club?
Well, thank you for having us.
I just have one other question. The findings, the recommendations that you have here, do you have a plan to actually move forward with those right now? So, so you have funding and everything that you can move forward with this plan right here that was?
In a smaller scale, because it's only us and our coalition members. But yeah.
Okay. I just want to, because we've done a lot of big media health campaigns, and just be careful of what, billboards and stuff get really expensive, and they really don't have that much. But I'm sure you guys know that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you
so much.
And if you have any more questions, it's actually, our contact information is actually, I think, on the last or second to last page of the slide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a speaker card on items 2 and 3. Before we get to 3, I assume it's probably safe to invite Mr. Paul up to speak, so that we can take into consideration his comments, and then we'll proceed.
I wanted to see if that was on. Chair and Commissioners, good afternoon. What an interesting discussion, and I come here almost renewed with the effort, because that's all we have is just to push back on the problem. I found a video on YouTube, a psychologist named Jordan Peterson. He's got a whole bunch of great videos, but one he was talking about Homer Simpson as the noble fool, and Homer screws up, but what he does have is a commitment to his family. So he's always there for them, even in the misguided ways, and these are the things that are the most important. There's so much here. I worked in a jail once, and there was a guy who was constantly in for DUI, and they'd put him in a cell, and he'd get 6 months. And the first day he was out, he'd be drunk and driving around. So, I mean, you know, addiction, my wife, I've talked to you before about my using some of those opioids for the pain that I suffer from. And I tell you, she laughs at me because she does medical transcription of people that actually get massive amounts of these drugs. So the 1 or 2 pills I use over the course of a week, you know, I want to not do it. So just as a moral thing, I saw a guy over the weekend, a veteran from the war, who had both of his legs blown off, and he's on the opioids, and he's trying to get off them, and he just wants the moral victory of not having to use these drugs. But so, you know, that's where it really comes down to. It comes down to, even in one of those Peterson videos, he talks about how the meth and all the other things, it takes a week, 2 weeks, the painkillers to actually come out of your system, so you're not physically addicted, but the psychological problems are what you're trying to overcome. So that's why I always try and work on programs that help people learn some self-identity, some hope. You know, we live in a world where there's not a lot of hope. There's a new book out today, Bob Woodward's Fear, and it talks about the crazy behavior that goes on in the White House, and it's just discouraging because everybody just gets brought down by that. We need moral guidance. That's what we need more than anything. And these programs, just going out, you know, I'm not trying to split the hairs, but sometimes just one intervention can help. Talking to somebody who is in and I know this personally, this saved my life, you know, meeting that one person that made a difference in my life. Of course, this is 40-some years ago, but I remember that little things mean a lot. So what we do here matters. And I feel a little bit guilty because I'm negligent in coming forward with some of these programs that I want to do that help kids develop a sense of identity and a self-defense sort of a situation where they learn that, well, you learn so much by discovering things about yourself and how to protect yourself. And so these are very good things, and I would love to talk to Denise at some point later. I have some ideas that I just need more time and help with to put together. And but seriously, everybody just pushing back. That's the best we could do, and it makes a big difference. And it makes a big difference to the one person that we help, and they go on and help. And I'm in it with you. I appreciate you all. This is some great stuff, and I wouldn't have missed this for the world. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mr. Paul. I think his last comment is probably what we should take from this. You know, we have the situation where we have numbers and numbers. Tarzana can tell us exactly because they do the research of people who have these problems. But how do we reach them, and how do we affect change in that first one, right? And then, you know we've done something, and then we got another one after that, another one after that. I mean, I use that example. I'm sure, Michelle, in your line of work you do as well. You know, we just need to solve the first problem. But I think that getting back to years ago on this commission, in the predecessor commission, Michelle will agree, we've spent so much time on trying to marry the resources available in the community so that the stakeholders know we're all available and who's available and how they're available and what we can all do. But I think we were probably looking at it the wrong way because we were looking at it as such a large spectrum with respect to all the different things people do and all the different capacities of health, whether it's health and wellness, drugs. So if we hone it in and we pick this age group, if we pick this demographic, we use the college, maybe we use Tarzana, city resources. So what do we do? Do we put on a fair, resource fair?
I have a suggestion.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So we need to form a subcommittee, and the subcommittee works on creating the program so that we're not violating the Brown Act. If we continue to do it in this manner, we're not going to be able to implement or administer.
I agree.
So the subcommittee would be AV College, the DA, all the people that we've heard from will be part of that subcommittee to be able to sit down, and then one of the members, and I have to say Michelle deals with all of the groups that have come here, plus hundreds more. So we do have to have somebody from the commission that would be willing to come to all of the subcommittee meetings, roll up their sleeves, get down and do the work, and then come back to you and let you make a decision if that's where you want to go as the program develops. Because that's the only way to get it done.
I agree.
We need to get it done.
No, I agree, because otherwise, who else do we have left to hear from? I can't think of many groups that we haven't heard from that are involved with this. I think what I found of interest was in Tarzana's presentation. They talked about the paramedics, they talked about the hospital, they've talked about, and Dr. Zimmerman, same thing. All of these groups we've spoken to, and they've spoken to us. The ER doctors, these are all our stakeholders. These are the people that need to be a part of this committee meeting. I think your recommendation is wonderful. So, how do I vote? I'm kidding.
We have three members of the committee and be on the subcommittee.
Are you sure? Okay. So I'm Michelle's fine. Everybody works at a different entity. You're like in medical. So if any of you want to volunteer, it's fine. If you don't, it's fine too, because I'll get all the people that spoke at the different meetings and we'll work with them. So it's up to you. You let me know. So I don't think we need a motion to form a subcommittee.
I don't think so either.
No, and the subcommittee has to be a public meeting. It's not, it'll be held like in the EOC, and those people be invited, and we'll have discussion. The public's invited.
Sure.
And usually they don't comment. I think they can. I'm not sure. I'd have to talk to Britt again. But, don't have to? So, yeah, Britt and I talked about this. She's the
Clerk.
Yeah, and that would be the best way to have the subcommittee, not to violate the Brown Act. So apparently, I guess if you want to not participate this month, and then one of you want to go ahead and join in and participate on another month, as long as we don't have more than 3, just email me and check in.
Okay.
And then we'll get the people together that came to the meetings that have an interest and want to do something and see what we can come up. But I think the main place is we'll get them all to get to be at the college, since it has the no real drug prevention programs. And then if we can get it out to the other colleges or the other trades or trade schools, as we develop something that they get excited about and want to participate, then it will just continue to grow. So,
I'm certainly interested in.
okay. Okay. So we'll just start for now, and then hopefully have something to report back. But if we don't, we might want to skip a meeting.
Yeah, I was going to recommend.
It's going to be a little bit hard to coordinate everybody.
I was going to recommend we table or cancel the, so that way we don't have to coordinate schedules. Let's cancel the wow, it's already, the October meeting,
Okay,
come back in November with the goal of having at least one subcommittee meeting with all the stakeholders in October. Because, I mean, let's face it, it's already September, so.
right. Or maybe more. We might be
Yeah.
able, if the subcommittee's really, we might have 1 or 2 meetings.
Sure. If we get the participation necessary, let's try to get one at the end of the month and maybe another one in October before the November meeting, and we'll all report back at that point, so.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and, if you want to skip the October meeting, you need to make a motion in a second, and we can vote on it to skip October's meeting.
Do you guys agree? I'll entertain a motion from somebody.
I make a motion to skip the October meeting.
A second?
Okay, and we'll vote. Okay, so we'll be back here for this commission, our meeting, regularly scheduled time for November, first Tuesday, 5 p.m. in November. And then everyone keep, look out for the emails and phone calls from city staff so that we can all be, we can confirm who will be there, no more than 3 of us, so.
And can I just suggest a homework assignment? Because I know Elizabeth and I have been kind of like, surfing the web, trying to find an evidence-based, especially like college
Couldn't
program. So if anybody knows of any tips?
What is it, TIPS? TIPS?
Okay, yeah, that would be great, because,
Yeah, and then you can forward to me.
yeah. Okay, well, we've just been kind of looking for an already developed college kind
Yeah.
of prevention program, but it's been
Tough.
more
Hard.
difficult, yeah, so.
I agree with that.
So we'll look into that one. And anybody else that knows of any programs, Tarzana group, anybody here on the commission?
Yeah,
that'd
and
be
you
great.
guys have my email.
Angela, too, if you've heard anything through your work, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay. Any other commissioner comments this month? Okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn. 6:02.